Have you ever been tempted to pull out a Ouija board? Just for a bit of fun? Maybe on a sleepover or a quiet night when you're feeling a little brave. I get it. The curiosity is powerful. You light a few candles, gather your friends, and ask the question everyone asks, is anyone there? But what if something answers back? And what if that something isn't just a figment of your imagination or your friend secretly pushing the planchette? Today, I'm going to tell you a story. It's a story about why you should think twice, maybe even 3 times, before you invite the unknown into your home. This isn't a story I read online or heard from a friend of a friend. This happened to someone I know, a guy named Leo, and it changed his life forever. Leo was a skeptic. He laughed at ghost stories, rolled his eyes at paranormal shows, and believed everything had a rational explanation. So when his younger sister, Maya, brought home a vintage Ouija board she found at a thrift store, he saw it as nothing more than a cheap thrill, a party trick. They were home alone for the weekend. Their parents were out of town, leaving them in the quiet stillness of their old suburban house. The kind of house with creaks and groans that you usually ignore on Saturday night, with a storm rattling the windows. Maya begged him to play. "Come on, Leo," she'd said, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and excitement. "It'll be fun, just once." Reluctantly, Leo agreed. He figured he'd humor her, maybe even use the opportunity to prove how silly the whole thing was. They set it up on the living room floor. The board was old, the wood dark and worn, the letters faded from countless other hands. They lit a single candle, casting long, dancing shadows across the room. Leo felt a little ridiculous, but he played along. They placed their fingertips lightly on the planchette. "Is anyone with us?" Maya whispered, her voice trembling slightly. For a long minute, nothing happened. The planchette stayed perfectly still. Leo was about to call it a night, ready to say "I told you so," when it moved. It was a slow, deliberate slide. Not jerky, not like someone was pushing it. It glided across the board to ease. Leo's heart skipped a beat. He glanced at Maya. Her face was pale, her hands visibly shaking. He quickly told himself it was just her subconscious movements pushing the pointer. He had to be rational. "What is your name?" Leo asked, his own voice a little firmer this time, trying to take control. The planchette moved again, faster. This time, it spelled out Z-O now. If you've ever dipped your toes into the world of the paranormal, that name might send a shiver down your spine. Zozo is a name that pops up in Ouija board stories all over the world, often associated with a malevolent entity, but Leo had never heard of it. To him, it was just a strange, silly name. "Okay, Zozo," Leo said with a nervous laugh. "Where are you?" The planchette zipped across the board to HER. A cold draft seemed to sweep through the room, making the candle flame flicker wildly. The shadows on the wall contorted into strange shapes. Leo felt the atmosphere shift. The playful mood was gone, replaced by a thick, heavy tension. Maya was starting to get genuinely scared. "Leo, I want to stop," she said, trying to pull her fingers away. But it felt like the planchette was stuck to their hands, a strange magnetic pole holding them in place. "We have to say goodbye," she insisted. "According to the rules, you always have to move the planchette to goodbye to close the session." But when they tried, it resisted. It wouldn't go. Instead, it started moving on its own, spelling out messages without them even asking questions. It spelled out Hermione. Then it darted back and forth between the letters M over and over again. Maya started crying. The air grew colder. The storm outside seemed to intensify, with a loud clap of thunder shaking the entire house. That's when things escalated. From the upstairs hallway, they heard a loud bang, like a door had been slammed shut. They both jumped, their eyes darting towards the darkened staircase. Then they heard footsteps. Slow, heavy footsteps creaking on the floorboards directly above them in their parents' bedroom. They were supposed to be the only ones home. Leo, despite the icy fear gripping him, felt a surge of protective anger. He thought maybe a burglar had broken in, using the storm as cover. He stood up, grabbing the heaviest thing he could find, a fireplace poker. "Stay here," he whispered to Maya, who was now huddled on the floor, sobbing. He crept towards the stairs, his heart pounding against his ribs. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to grab his sister and get out of the house. But the thought of someone being in their parents' room, of Maya being in danger, pushed him forward. He took the stairs one by one, the poker held out in front of him. The footsteps had stopped. An eerie silence had fallen over the house, broken only by the rain and Maya's quiet sobs from downstairs. He reached the top of the stairs. The hallway was dark, but the door to his parents' bedroom was ajar, a sliver of blackness in the gloom. He pushed it open slowly. The room was empty. The window was locked. Nothing seemed out of place. He checked the closet, under the bed, nothing. He felt a confusing mix of relief and even greater fear. If no one was there, what had made the sounds? He turned to leave, and that's when he saw it, scratched into the polished wood of the bedroom door. Fresh and raw were 4 letters, Z. He ran back downstairs to find Maya staring at the Ouija board in horror. The planchette was no longer on the board. It was on the other side of the room, lying on the floor as if it had been thrown. And the candle was out, plunging the room into near darkness. They didn't need any more convincing. They grabbed the board and the planchette, ran out into the pouring rain, and threw it into the trash can at the curb. They spent the rest of the night huddled together on the couch with every single light in the house on, waiting for the sun to rise. When their parents came home the next day, they didn't say a word. How could they explain the scratches on the door or the deep, unshakable feeling of dread that had settled over the house? They tried to pretend it never happened, but Zozo wasn't finished with them. In the weeks that followed, strange things kept happening. It started small. Objects would move on their own. The TV would turn on and off. Whispers would echo through the empty halls. Maya started having terrible nightmares. She'd wake up screaming, claiming a dark figure with no face was standing in the corner of her room, watching her. She became withdrawn and constantly afraid. Leo felt consumed by guilt. He was the one who was supposed to protect her, and he had let this thing into their lives. The house no longer felt like a home. It felt like a prison. They were being watched, tormented by an entity they couldn't see but could definitely feel. The activity centered around Maya. Her toys would be arranged in strange patterns. Her drawings would have the name Zozo scribbled on them. One evening, Leo walked into her room to find every single piece of her clothing pulled out of her closet and drawers piled in the middle of the floor. The breaking point came a month later. Leo woke up in the middle of the night to a blood-curdling scream from Maya's room. He sprinted down the hall and burst in. The room was freezing cold. Maya was sitting up in her bed, pointing at the wall opposite her, her face a mask of pure terror. Leo followed her gaze, and his blood ran cold. Written on the wall, in what looked like black crayon, were the words, "Maya is mine." They couldn't live like this anymore. The next day, Leo confessed everything to his parents. He expected them to be angry, to ground him for life. But seeing the genuine terror in their children's eyes and knowing something was deeply wrong in their home, they listened. They ended up contacting a paranormal investigation team and eventually a spiritual cleanser to come to the house. It was a long, draining process. The cleansing seemed to help. The intense activity subsided, the heavy atmosphere lifted, and Maya slowly started to become herself again. They eventually moved out of that house. They couldn't shake the memories, the feeling of what had happened within those walls. Leo is no longer a skeptic. That one night with the Ouija board taught him a terrifying lesson. There are doors that should never be opened. Playing with a Ouija board isn't a game. You don't know who or what is on the other end of that connection. You're essentially sending out a blind invitation into the unknown, and you might not like who accepts. So, the next time you see one of those boards in a store or a friend suggests playing for a laugh, remember Leo's story. Remember Zozo? Some things are better left unknown, and some doors are better left permanently closed. Thanks for listening. Stay safe out there, and maybe stick to board games that don't talk back. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories. See you next time.